Hi there, I'm Katrina with Stonehammer UNESCO Global Geopark. We have this incredible region in southern New Brunswick, Canada, where you can see rocks and fossils representing an almost continuous geologic history going back 1 billion years. So this is an incredible spot to study geology. Folks have been studying it here for over 100 years already, and you can actually see a huge assortment of different fossils representing the diversity of life on Earth, the evolution of these species over time. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about a few of the fossils we can find here.
So I'm gonna go do a tour of the geodiversity we have here in Percé. So it's pretty easy because all the rocks are a little bit of a different color. So you see the two cliffs behind me right here? There's one that's a little bit more yellow and the other is a little more gray. So those are two distinct geological features. And a little bit further here we have the beautiful Percé rock. I say it's a little bit of a pinkish hue. That also is a different geological structure. Bonaventure Island, which is more of a reddish color, another geological feature. And in the back over there, I don't know if you can see that right there, that's the Table Roland. That's the same geology as they have across on the island. So here in Percé we have 5 distinct geological formations, and they range about 300 million years old.
Thanks, Katrina. Hi, everybody. My name's Caleb. I'm with the Cliffs of Fundy UNESCO Global Geopark, located along the north shore of the Minas Basin in the Bay of Fundy, located in Mi'kma'ki, now today called Nova Scotia. And I'm really glad that you're joining us today to explore geodiversity in some of the Atlantic Canadian geoparks. So in the Cliffs of Fundy Geopark, we have 3 main interpretive pillars. One centers on the geodiversity of the area, the rocks, the geologic history, and the story of the assembly and the separation of the supercontinent Pangaea. And we're going to look at some examples of both sides of that story today. We also interpret the highest tides, the highest tidal range in the entire world recorded in the Bay of Fundy, as well as the intrinsic cultural and indigenous heritage all along this area, recorded in the oral histories of the Mi'kmaq people.
So here I am now at the Reversing Falls, at the center of Stonehammer Geopark in the city of St. John. So this site is famous for a number of reasons, including that this is one of the sites where you can see the highest tides in the world from the Bay of Fundy meeting the St. John River through this narrow gorge. So it creates these incredible rapids and whirlpools. You can see a few of right now. So these are class 5 rapids that happen twice a day, and it's just really spectacular to witness, but not many people know the reason why we have the rapids here. So they're actually created by an underwater waterfall formed because 2 different rock types met here and eroded over time to create a waterfall, which was then submerged underwater. So looking way back, the rocks that actually form the contact are visible right here. So on one side, we've actually got Precambrian limestones. And these limestones are really special. They're partially metamorphosed to marble. And the fossils that we can find in them were actually once the oldest evidence of life on Earth. So when they were first discovered here in 1890, they were the oldest evidence of life anyone had ever seen before in the geologic record. So these fossils are called stromatolites, and they're Precambrian, about 1 billion years old, and they're brushed right up against these lovely Cambrian sandstones and slates that actually have trilobite fossils in them, which I'll talk about in a minute.
So, here we are at Economy Falls, right behind my hand here. The incredible cliffside here is the water cuts down through it and flows out the Economy River to the Bay of Fundy. This is a really spectacular spot and a geosite within the Cliffs of Fundy Geopark that represents some of the oldest rocks in the Cobequid Highlands. The rocks that make up the falls were once granites that then got squeezed and compressed and turned into a rock called gneiss. And these granite gneisses are over 734 million years old. And they represent some of the breakup of the supercontinent that came before Pangaea, called Rodinia. And so we heard about lots of early life forms in Stonehammer and some of these really aggressive and violent continental changes were happening while these creatures were still living and evolving and surviving. So, although no fossils here, a very strong example of the power of plate tectonics as we watch water crash over the edge of a lost continent. Back to you.
Our next fossil from Stonehammer Geopark is the trilobite. So trilobites are our official mascot for the geopark because there were tons of them found in this region in the 18 and 1900s, including one of the largest trilobites in the world. So if we look right here, I have a cast of that trilobite found in 1886 by a 14-year-old boy by the name of Will Matthew. So the trilobite has been described as about the size of a dinner plate, which was extraordinarily large for the time. Will Matthew, he'd already been out fossil hunting quite a bit with his father and other members of the Stonehammer Club, which was a group of people who were exploring the geology and nature of the area at that time, and from which Stonehammer actually takes its name. So Stonehammer Club led to Stonehammer Geopark, and some of these early discoveries are so important to the history of our region, and trilobites are just my absolute favorite. They're a Cambrian fossil. They started appearing about 541 million years ago during the Cambrian explosion of life. So talk about geodiversity. You're seeing all of these new organisms emerging. All of a sudden, there was very little before, and all of a sudden, there's all of these fossils to be found. So we're really lucky to have a whole bunch of trilobites within our geopark.
So,
Here we are now at the western end of the geopark at the West Advocate Geosite. And this is one of the very rare places in the geopark where you actually get to walk across a not so active fault zone. Where I'm standing right here by this brook is the trace of the Cobequid Fault in the beach. And on one side, on the east, there are the famous, community famous red rocks on this side. And when I spin to the west, you see the point of Cape Chignecto and much older rocks. The rocks on the west side here are 360 million years old, whereas the rocks on my right are 200 million years old. And this break in these rock units, this change from the red of red rocks to the gray of the rocks at West Advocate, mark a major change in the assembly of the Appalachian Mountains and the juxtaposition and then the later rifting apart of the supercontinent Pangaea and the beginning of the Atlantic Ocean, the birth of the Atlantic Ocean here. So, thanks very much for checking in. Very significant point in geologic time. Now, back to you.
So behind me we have one of my favorite geological features of the Percé region. This is Pic de l'Aurore behind me. So what we have here is a flower structure. So what is a flower structure? Well, as I mentioned before, the Appalachian, the mountains we have here were formed by compression, two continents colliding together. And here what happened is there's a part of the rock that got squeezed together and it plumed out of the top, kind of like a flower. One way to see it is if you take a big stack of paper and you put a lot of pressure on it, there might be some sheets of paper that fly out the top. Well, that's your flower structure right here. And you can see behind the red formation, which is our conglomerates, you can see a gray formation down below there. That's a limestone. So as you can see, just visually, just by the color of the rock, we can easily tell these are two completely distinct geological formations.
So I'm here now at Norton Moosehorn Creek. So this is a really special geosite. Not only are we celebrating the cultural history of New Brunswick here with one of our iconic covered bridges, but we're also looking at some of the earliest evidence of amphibians walking on land. So while the rocks aren't completely accessible, they do preserve an ancient history going back to the early Carboniferous period, about 350 million years ago. So when they were first excavating this area to build the new highway, they uncovered what would be known as the Norton Fossil Forest. So there's actually over 700 trees preserved here in life positions on what would have been sort of an ancient lake bottom. And between these tree stumps and entire trees that have been preserved, we actually have some of the earliest evidence of amphibians walking on land in the form of little trackways. So this is a really special site in the geopark that represents an incredible part of our geodiversity.
Okay, so here I have a nice map of the Gaspé. As you can see, there is a very big geodiversity, a lot of different geological units. And they're all oriented pretty much east-west, because when the two continents collided, they collided from the south and the north, and they squished all the rock units together like this, giving us this east-west direction. So our rocks that we can find here in Percé, this is a time scale of the Earth. Our oldest rock date back from the Cambrian era here. We have rocks from Devonian, Silurian, and Carboniferous, but we do not have any rocks from here all the way up to here. So we have what they call a hiatus. We don't have any geological information about all these different eras. And here the Quaternary is the era we're in right now, and it's the Ice Age. And we have some traces of the Ice Age here in the Quaternary. So if you want to come a little closer here, this is a small sample of the rocks that we have in Percé. This is a piece of the Percé rock. As you can see, there's lamination, some darker and some lighter colors, and it's been heavily deformed by the tectonic movements. Here we have a nice fossil of a trilobite. I'm sure Katrina is going to talk more about these fossils here, but we find some here in Percé also. And this right here is a piece of petrified wood. This is fossilized wood that dates back from the Carboniferous era. This is the red conglomerate that is found on Bonaventure Island and all over the place around here. And this is a piece of limestone with a bunch of different tiny little fossils all around it. So as you can see, geology lets us have a good idea of the evolution of species in our territory here. From the oldest being the corals that I don't have right here, to the youngest being the fossilized wood that I have here.
All right, so in the Triassic, there were all kinds of sediments being deposited in a rift valley in the middle of the supercontinent Pangaea. Where we are in Nova Scotia, we were a very, very long way from water, and all of the sediment was all of these red sediments you see here in the bottom of the cliff were deposited in an arid rift valley, very dry, like a desert. As the continents start to split apart and the supercontinent Pangaea starts to break apart, lava starts to spew up from inside the earth. And that's all the black rocks that we see here. This is a rock called basalt. And that basalt you can see lays right on top of all the red rocks below. And that causes gases to be extruded into the atmosphere, and it made living conditions very unsuitable for all of the reptiles and amphibians that were living here. And that is what caused this mass extinction event, where so much life on land was lost and paved the way for the dinosaurs to truly come onto the scene. So here we are again. And this time we're in beautiful Five Islands. Standing behind me is the Old Wife Formation at Five Islands Provincial Park. And this is a really, really amazing place to study the geology around one of the very significant geological time points in the Cliffs of Fundy Geopark. Because here, this panoramic view that you've got behind the Old Wife is a near continuous record of the end Triassic extinction. And what people don't know about the end Triassic extinction is that this is we go from basically no dinosaurs, a large outpouring of lava that wiped out all the reptiles and amphibian competition for the dinosaurs, and then we're into Jurassic rocks on the western side of the Old Wife here. And these are where correlative rocks further down the bay are where the oldest dinosaur fossils in Canada have been found. So a very cool place to explore and definitely worth a look.
And finally, we've got some excellent quaternary deposits in the Stonehammer Geopark. So behind me, we've got cliffs of marine clay that were deposited at the end of the last ice age. So the last glacial maximum was about 20,000 years ago, and these deposits come from around that time. You can find marine organisms fossilized or on the way to becoming fossils within this sediment. So we've got snails and clams and even some brittle stars, which are incredible to see, and they date to about 10 to 20,000 years ago. So all of these fossils can be found right here in the Stonehammer Geopark as part of the quaternary deposits we have from this time period.
So behind me here we have the Bonaventure Island, and it gives us a very good clue of where the glaciers were traveling here in the region. So as you may know, here in the Percé region we had about 4 kilometers of ice over our heads, and that really changed the landscape that we have here in Percé. So the glaciers came from the south and they moved towards the north. And how do we know that? Well, the shape of the Bonaventure Island gives us a clue. We have a very gentle slope on the south side and a very abrupt cliff on the north side. That's because when the glacier came over the mountain, it eroded the south side of it, and when it came back down on the other side, it ripped off some chunks of rock. We call it plucking in English. So all the northern part of the island was plucked off. And that's a very good clue that during the Quaternary we had huge glaciers traveling over this place.
So here I am at the Mi'kmaq de Burt Interpretive Trail. It's one of the Cliffs of Fundy Geoparks geosites that really highlights the later part, the Holocene period of the geological history here in the geopark. And this Holocene record is explored through archaeology, where this is a place here in the de Burt site, not far from where I'm standing. There have been artifacts uncovered. These are traced back to These are ancestors of the Mi'kmaq people and indigenous communities that were living here 13,500 years ago.